Now, Israel's military operation in the occupied West Bank is in its third day. At least 10 people have been killed in the Jenin refugee camp. Another 40, including children, have been injured. Israeli military bulldozers tore up roads in Jenin and destroyed the infrastructure there. And families from the camp have been forced to flee their homes. Now, many are sheltering at a local hospital. The raids have been taking place across the territory, but the largest Israeli army presence is actually in the Jenin refugee camp. UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese is warning that if the offensive continues, the genocide of Palestinians will not be confined to Gaza. Hamza Salhut has the story from Jordan's capital, Amman. That's because the Israeli government and Palestinian authorities have banned Al Jazeera from reporting not just in Israel, but also in the occupied territories.
These are the final moments 10-year-old Damish Shaib filmed of his father before he was shot and killed by Israeli forces. The child says he was terrified.
My father said from where we were there was nothing happening. Then Israeli soldiers started shooting. The bullets entered his body. He said, "Oh God." Then the car went so fast off the sidewalk and then into a post in the road. I jumped from the window.
As Israel's military assault continues on the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces say they want to crack down on armed Palestinian fighters, something the military says it hopes to accomplish in large-scale raids like this one. But the collective punishment of this raid isn't limited to Jenin. Israeli forces have set up additional checkpoints throughout the occupied West Bank as part of their ongoing operation. In Hebron, relatives of Iman Jardat say she died in an ambulance, waiting to be taken to a hospital.
The Israeli army obstructed the ambulance from crossing a checkpoint. The doctor said in the report that if she had arrived early at the hospital, she would still be alive.
But elsewhere in the Palestinian territory, violent Israeli settlers continue to attack Palestinian towns and villages under the protection of the army. Attacks like these have only increased since the start of Israel's war on Gaza, with little to no consequence. Israel says it's expanding its military operations in the occupied West Bank and will use any means necessary to do so. But Palestinians say this is just another reality of life under Israeli occupation. Hamdah Salhut, Al Jazeera, Amman.
Now, Israel's offensive in the Palestinian refugee camp isn't new and aims to strike at the heart of Palestinian resistance. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, set up the Jenin camp in 1953 to accommodate Palestinians that were forcibly displaced by Israel during the Nakba, which is also known as the catastrophe. Today, more than 24,000 people live in just 420 square meters, unable to return to their ancestral lands, despite international laws and a UN resolution protecting that right. Now, the camp is a hub for Palestinian resistance groups, which operate under the umbrella of the Jenin Brigade. It has one of the highest unemployment and poverty rates among the 19 refugee camps in occupied West Bank, and due to Israeli restrictions on movement and years of neglect by the Palestinian Authority. Now, in 2002, it was the site of a major Israeli offensive which killed at least 52 Palestinians, mostly civilians, and also destroyed much of the camp. Well, Hamza Zubeidat is a researcher and activist in occupied West Bank. He joins us live now from Bethlehem. Thank you very much for joining us. As we heard there, so that number is at least 10 just in Jenin refugee camp. And now we're getting reports from the Israelis saying that they've killed 2 other Palestinians outside of Jenin for an attack on settlers back in January. This clearly isn't just focusing on Jenin refugee camp, but there's a lot more going on across occupied West Bank.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks a lot for having me. Thanks a lot for Al Jazeera and for everything you do, guys, for to support us and to support the Palestinian cause in general. Yes, you are right. It's not only in Jenin. We knew since during the catastrophe and during the genocide in Gaza, and it wasn't a secret that the next step for the Israeli government is going to be the West Bank. And actually, the West Bank is their gift, if I can say, in general. Like whatever, any kind of political a process happens around or inside Palestine, the West Bank is going to be the biggest gift for the Israelis because they believe that it belongs to them, Judah and Samaria. And we started actually to see this in different maps. Instead of West Bank, it became Judah and Samaria. And this is very dangerous. The situation in the West Bank nowadays is really catastrophic. If you want to move as a Palestinian from a city to another, let's say from Bethlehem to Ramallah, usually it takes 45 to 1 hour maximum. But nowadays, it took a 1 full day. And sometimes you have to sleep in the car waiting the checkpoint to open. And actually, the checkpoints are mostly 3 or 4 soldiers, young soldiers, who are doing this on purpose. So this is a political order by the Israeli government. And if the military operation is now running in Jenin camp and, of course, in the north in general and of the West Bank, we are living it as Palestinians in every single village and refugee camp and city in the West Bank. I mean, by isolating all the Palestinian communities through around 900 checkpoints, Israel is increasing the vulnerability of the Palestinian communities because, in general, the Palestinian cities or the Palestinian society are usually divided as a governorate surrounded by small villages and towns. Now, by isolating and cutting the Palestinian villages and cities from each other, that means no more doctors, no more nurses, no more teachers, no more even transporting the goods and fruits and vegetables from a place to another. So that means more poverty, more suffering for the Palestinian people.
So as a Palestinian yourself in Bethlehem, we've seen and reported extensively on Israel's increased number of raids since the October 7 attack. And as you said, closing off major parts and even crossings into and out of occupied West Bank. What's it been like for you as a Palestinian, given the circumstances? And certainly with the release of those prisoners as part of the ceasefire, there seems to have been a lot of fear amongst Palestinians because they've been warned not to celebrate the release of those prisoners.
Well, maybe the Israelis are using this as just to say that we are making this kind of collective punishment, but in fact it's a policy. This is a daily life we live here in the West Bank, not only since the 7th of October, much before. Let's say since the beginning or since the electing of the Netanyahu government, Israel started to say clearly that the West Bank is their goal. They want to annex. And you remember in the last presidency of Donald Trump and his the so-called Trump plan, they were talking about annexing the West Bank or annexing the majority of the land in the West Bank. Now we are in the second term of him, and the first on his first day, he signed an order to end the sanctions on a group of fanatic settlers who were sentenced by violating and making terrorist actions against the Palestinian people. And this is a green light for the settlers to do more. So we are talking about the Israeli government and also the American, unfortunately, the American new government is also participating in this. I can tell you that this is a daily and systematic Israeli government. It's not about the 7th of October. It's not about the ceasefire. It's not about the collective punishment only and because of preventing the Palestinians from celebrating. Actually, for us, for the Palestinians, our only celebration was seeing our people in Gaza. I can't say happy, but at least the Israeli army is not killing them anymore. and we hope that this will be permanent. So what is going on in the West Bank is a continuous annexing process, and it's I just want to share this with you, and it's really funny. Some Israeli politicians are saying that there was an Israeli plan called E1, which means East Jerusalem, which is a plan to connect Jerusalem with Ma'ale Adumim settlement and also with the Dead Sea. Now they say they will call it Trump 1, T1. So.
Okay.
It feels like the Palestinian people are out of any plans for anyone in this world. And unfortunately, let me say it clearly,
Right.
unfortunately, it seems like we are also out of even the Arab regime's thoughts and plans for the future.
Okay, well, we'll just have to wait and see what happens there with the new US Trump administration in power. Thank you very much there, Hamza Zubeidat, researcher and activist in occupied West Bank.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.